Get ready to learn. Get ready to learn, baby. A rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction. So a fraction. So any number that can be written as a fraction. So 3/5 is rational. 0.6 repeating is rational. We learned the other day that we could be like, there's 1/6, and so we're going to put that over a 9, and if you divide the top and the bottom by 3, you get that guy. So it is rational. It is rational. Rational numbers are any number that can be written as a fraction. Let me do another one of those problems. If I give you 0.613 with a line over, and we'll make it 3.613. What you do is you put, I like this color. You put 613, didn't work, over 999 because that's three numbers that are repeating, and you throw the 3 in front of it. That's rational. A rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction. So like 5.6, because it stops, can be written as a fraction. 3 can be written as a fraction because I can put it over 1. And this is, so that's what a rational number is. Today, we're going to talk about irrational numbers. And if you watched the video this morning, you know exactly what an irrational number is. An irrational number can't be written as a fraction, cannot be a fraction. All right, so let's come up with some of the most basic examples. And if you saw me really scroll past this, this is a math joke. Don't you think you guys should stop fighting? You're both being irrational. Ha 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 ha. Why is that funny? Well, it's funny because pi is an irrational number. Irrational number means it's going to be a decimal, no pattern, and it goes on forever. It's a decimal with no pattern that goes on forever. So like pi is an example. So like, Siri, list the first 15 digits of pi.
Okay, I found this.
No, you're not helping. Blah, 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 blah. Pi is 3.1415926535897 blah, 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 blah. It goes on forever. Looking at these numbers and looking at all the numbers that I just said, there's not going to be any pattern that I could be like, oh, cool, I could put a line above there. Nope, it goes on forever. The square root of 2 was another option. Okay, so what's the square root of 2?
The square root of 2 is approximately 1.41421.
So you probably can't see it, but there it starts at 1.4, and then it goes on, and 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 there's no end to it. So I can't even see what that says because my eyes are so bad. But basically, if it's the square root of a not perfect square, then it's going to be irrational. The perfect squares that we learned the other day were 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, those numbers. So if I tried to take the square root of 2, 5, 10, 15, all of those numbers that are not perfect squares, then I'm always, always, always going to get an irrational number. So what I want to do is I want to decide if this guy is rational or irrational. Now, pi is an ugly number. So pi divided by 6 is going to be an ugly number divided by 6, which still gives me an ugly number. So you might be thinking, well, that's a fraction right there. You're not allowed to have decimals in fractions. You're not. Pi is 3.14, so that's a decimal. You're not allowed to have decimals in fractions. What's pi divided by 6?
It's about 0.5235.
So it tells me that, but it actually goes on forever. Is pi divided by 6 rational or irrational? I'm just curious if it'll tell me.
Here's what I found.
So it's not going to tell me. But if pi is irrational, then pi divided by 6 is also going to be irrational because it's going to be a terrible number. What's the cube root of 343?
The cube root of 343 is 7.
Ah, 7 can be written as 7 over 1, which is rational. What's negative square root of 81? I already know what it is.
The answer is negative 9.
And negative 9 can be written as negative 9 over 1, which is rational. Let's consult the internet to watch a few more examples.
Square roots, rational or irrational. Remember, rational means you can write it as a fraction. So we got to figure out what each one actually is and then determine if it's a fraction or not. Square root of 36 is 6, which means that's rational. And if you're like, 6 isn't a fraction, well, it is if you put it over 1, silly goose. Negative square root of 0.09 is 0.3, which may not look like a fraction, but 0.3 is the same as 3/10 because it's read out 3/10, and that's rational. Square root of 42, I don't know what that is because it's not a perfect square, so that's irrational. And then last but not least, the square root of 4 over 25 ends up being 2 over 5, which is rational.
I love my handwriting when I use Sharpie. I should do it more often. I should just buy a buttload of crap of Sharpies. What's the cube root of what's the cube root of 49?
The cube root of 49 is approximately 3.65931.
So since that's not an obvious answer, since that's not anything, it said and again, let me show you my phone again. Okay, 3 point, I know you can't perfectly see it, but there it is. And it goes on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So this is irrational because just like if it's not a perfect cube and I try to cube root it, it's going to be a mess. And so that's going to be irrational. 52 over 13, it's already a fraction. So can a fraction be written as a fraction? Yes. Do you know the square root of 15? Nope. I know the square root of 16 is 4, but I don't know what the square root of 15 is. That's irrational. Square root of 15.
I found this on the web.
Yeah, you're not helping me at all today, baby. Baby. Okay. 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 Easy. If it's an ugly mess, it's irrational. If it's fine, or if it's a fraction, or if it stops, or if it repeats itself, then it is rational. Now this is tricky. 0.12122, You might look at that and say, that's a pattern. I could put a line over something. No, you can't. Because what's going to happen is it's going to be 12222, 12222. And there's nowhere that I can put the nice line over top of it that allows me to turn it into a fraction. So this one's irrational because it's not repeating. It looks like it has a pattern, but it doesn't have a pattern. I know what the square root of 196 is. It's 14. So throw a negative in front of it, and you have yourself a rational number. Look, it's a decimal that stops. So if it stops, that's it. Back in the day, you were taught that the way you were supposed to read this is 1 and 125 thousandths. So I could write this as negative 1 and 125 thousandths. Oh, look, a fraction, which means it's rational. So if it's a decimal that stops, it's rational. If it's a decimal that goes on forever but has a pattern, it's rational. If it's a decimal that goes on forever but doesn't have a pattern and you can't put a line over it, it's irrational. Approximate the number to the nearest integer in tenth. Negative square root of 13.
The answer is approximately negative 3.60555.
Yikes, that looks bad. When we round that to the nearest integer, 3.6, that 6 is 5 or above, give it a shove. That rounds to negative 4. If I'm rounding it to the nearest 10, that's negative 3.6. And since there's a 0 after it, I'm leaving it as negative 3.6. Square root of 8.
The square root of 8 is approximately 2.82843.
An integer is a whole number that can be negative. So when I round that to the nearest whole number, 2.8 bumps that up to 3. And if I round it to the nearest tenth, then I look at the 8 there and see what comes after the 8. It's a 2, so it's 5 or below. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Don't round it up anymore. That's how the song goes. Negative square root of 24.
The answer is approximately negative 4.89898.
Now that looks like it could have a pattern, but it's not. What's those squiggly lines that I drew mean? That means it's about. It's approximately. These numbers go on forever because they're not pretty answers. Rounding that to the nearest number, nearest integer, negative 4.8 up, 5 or above, give it a shove. Negative 5, baby. 4 below, let it go. Well, here, I'm going to look at that 8. And that 8 has a 9 next to it. So the nearest tenth is going to be negative 4.9. Because that 9 bumps the 8 up to 9.
Which is the largest number? Well, let's find out what each of these are. Square root of 15. I don't have a calculator, but I do know that the square root of 16 is 4. So this is going to be a little less than 4. So I'll write that out exactly like that. 3 1/3 is 3.3333333, and pi is 3.14. So which one is the largest number? 3.14, 3.333, or the number that's a little less than 4? Well, the number that's a little less than 4 is the largest number. See? So simple.
So simple. My name is Mr. Perich. Which is greater? Well, let's turn both of these into decimals and see which one is greater. Square root of 35, cubed root of 80. By the way, I'm using Siri to do all my messy work. You could easily use Alexa. You could use OK Google, Hey Google, whatever. If you have an Android, I'm sure it'll do it too. You can type into Google, what is the square root of 35? What is the cube root of 80? And it'll tell you the answer. Square root of 35.
The square root of 35 is approximately 5.91608.
What's the cube root of 80?
The cube root of 80 is approximately 4.30887.
So what am I trying to find? Which one's greater? Which one's greater? U is. Because U ended up being 5 point something, almost 6 actually, and U ended up being 4 point something. Again, I could look at this and say, well, that's almost the square root of 36, and the square root of 36 is 6. So that's just a little bit smaller than 6. And you might look at that and say, I don't know what the cube root of 80 is, but I know the cube root of 64 is 4. So that might be helpful. So it's going to be 4 point something. If you're good at your squares and your cubes, you could certainly do that. In between what two integers does that exist? I'm putting away my phone, and here's why. Let me remind you the perfect squares up here. Okay, and I'll quickly write them out in this pretty yellow form. My perfect squares are 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, a hundo 21, and I might be able to squeeze in a hundo 44. What that means is the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 16 is 4. Square root of that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't know what the square root of negative 76 is. Let's actually start with this one because it's easier. I don't know what the square root of 51 is. I don't. But you know what I do know? I know what the square root of 49 is. And I do know what the square root of 64 is. And 51 lives in between 49 and 64, which means the square root of 51 lives in between the square root of 49 and the square root of 64, huh? The square root of 49 is 7. The square root of 64 is 8. So square root of 51 is in between 7 and 8. So what you're doing is you're trying to figure out in between what two perfect squares does that number live. Now take the square root of it, and I have my answer. So in between what two perfect squares does 76 live? Well, 76 lives in between 64 and 81. So I'm going to put 64 and 81. And I need to take the negative square root of that and the negative square root of that, just like I took the negative square root of this. The negative square root of 64 is 8, and the negative square root of 81 is negative 9, which means the square root of negative 76, which is in between 64 and 81, is going to be negative 8 and negative 9. Now, if you have no clue what you're doing and you're allowed to use a calculator, what's the square root of 51?
The square root of 51 is approximately 7.1414.
All right, so the square root of 51 is 7 point something, which means if you're thinking money, 7 point something, $7 and some cents is in between $7 and $8. Let's watch a video.
In between what two integers does the following number lie? Well, I have the square root of 79. I don't know what the square root of 79 is, but I do know what the square root of 64 is. That's 8. And I do know what the square root of 81 is. That's 9. And so the square root of 79 lives right in between those two. Which means the square root of 79, since it's in between the square root of 64 and the square root of 81, is going to live in between 8 and 9.
Of course, you already know that because you watched these videos this morning, and this is just child's play to you. I don't know what the square root of 87 is, but I do know what the square root of 81 is. And I do know what the square root of 100 is. And let's throw negatives in front of them. And so that's negative 9 and negative 10. The cube root's a little trickier. We don't have those memorized. The perfect cubes are 1, 8, 27, 64, 125. I think it's 256, but I could be wrong. I don't know. But these are the perfect cubes, the PC, if you will. I'm the PC police. Ha ha ha. Ho 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 ho. So I don't know what the cube root of 60 is. But you know what I do see up here? I see the cube root of 27, cubed root of 27, and the cube root of 64. And so let me see. 1, 2, 3. The cube root of 27 is 3. 4. The cube root of 64 is 4. And so my answer is in between 3 and 4. And if you look at that and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. What's the cube root of 60?
The cube root of 60 is approximately 3.914.
All right, so 3.91 is like $3.91. That's in between $3 and $4. Boom! Boom! Get out.
Pythagorean Theorem. I have to find the missing side. Pythagorean Theorem is this formula right here, which is used to find the missing sides of right triangles. Okay? C always represents the hypotenuse, also known as the longest side. So I can call you A, I can call you B, but I have to call you C. So I have 4 squared plus 3 squared equals x squared. 4 squared is 16. 3 squared is 9. X squared is x squared. 16 plus 9 is 25. 25 equals x squared. Now, how do I get an x all by itself if it's being squared? Square rooted, of course. Now, normally we would say positive or negative square root of 25. But since we're talking about a missing side, you can't have a negative length. So the square root of 25 is 5. X is 5 units long, whatever unit it's supposed to be.
All these videos. And it leads us to this. Let me see. Pythagorean Theorem. A squared. That is the grossest A I've ever made in my entire life. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. It doesn't matter what you call A or B as long as the longest side is C. So I'll call you A and I'll call you B. So that's going to turn into 4 squared plus 6 squared equals C squared. Square those numbers and then solve for C. 4 squared is 16. It's also a fun game. 6 squared is 36. How old I was last year. I mean, how old I will be in 10 years. Those two numbers are right next to each other, so I'm just going to add them up. Is C all by itself? No. I have the squared in the way. How do I get rid of the squared? Square root it. Square root it again. Now, I don't know what the square root of 52 is. I do know that the square root of 49 is 7. So this is going to be a little over 7. So let's just round it to whatever series says I can round it to. So C equals square root of 52.
The square root of 52 is approximately 7.2111.
So 2111 it is. Feet, meters, nothing. Okay. And if you're like, I don't feel like writing all, what do I round it to? If I don't tell you to round it, then round it as much as you want. I mean, again, my phone is showing me, it actually didn't say it. My phone is just giving me, again, a ridiculous amount of numbers. I know it's hard to zoom up on it, but, you know, there it is. So it gives you all the possible numbers that it could be and the fact that it just goes on forever. I believe we have one more and then that'll end the day. Find the missing side. Pythagorean theorem again. I have a squared plus b squared. Hello. That means 8 minutes left in class. Equals c squared. Doesn't matter which one I call A or B as long as the longest side is C. So I'll call 12C, I'll call you A, and I'll call you B. So A is 8. 8. B is Y. And C is 12. 8 squared is 64 plus y squared equals 12 squared is 144. Is y all by itself? No. What's in the way? Well, I have a 64 on the left side, and I also have that squared. Get rid of the 64 first. Minus 64, and that's going to end up being 80. Y squared equals 80. Is y all by itself? Now, no. Square root it. Square root it. I don't know what the square root of 80 is. I do know that the square root of 81 is 9. So the square root of 80 is just going to be a little bit less than 9. But square root of 80.
The square root of 80 is approximately 8.94427.
Square root of 80? 4427.
The square root of 80 is approximately 8.94427.
Feet, yards, inches. No, doesn't say. Stealing problems from the internet. Okay. Skip this one. This one's gross, but I like it. It's gross, but I like it. Watch. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. The longest side is that one. Doesn't matter which one you call A or B as long as the longest side is C. So what I have is -8, or the square root of 8 squared plus y squared equals 4 squared. Oh, I know. When I square a square root, they just cancel each other out. So that leaves me with 8. Nifty. 8 plus y squared equals 16 minus 8 y squared equals 8. What do I do now? Square root it. I don't know what the square root of 8 is, but I do know, what was that, y? And I'll bring it over here. I do know that the square root of 9 is 3, so this is going to be less than 3. What's the square root of 8?
The square root of 8 is approximately 2.82843.
No yards, no inches, no centimeters, no units. I'd love to do it, but I don't have time. We'll practice those later on. Your friend classifies the square root of 144. Is your friend correct? Well, wait a minute. 144 is 12. Is that rational or irrational? It's rational. No! Your friend is an idiot. Tell him. Go tell him on the mountain, over the hills. And I'm going to do this last one super fast. I'm going to just do it super fast. All right, here we go. Whether you're with me or not, I'm doing it super fast. I can draw a line there. I can draw a line there. This side is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks long. And this side is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 blocks long. I'll call you C. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I'll call you A. I'll call you B. Doesn't matter which one you call A or B as long as the longest side is C. So this is going to be 10 squared plus 6 squared equals c squared. 10 squared is a hundo. 6 squared is 36. I have two numbers that are right next to each other that I can just add up right now, so I'm going to do that. Is c all by itself? Nope. How do I get rid of a squared? Square root it. I don't know what the square root of 136 is, but I know that the square root of 144 is less than 12, or 12. So this is going to be a little bit less than 12. What's the square root of 136?
I found this on the web.
Square root of 136.
The square root of 136 is approximately 11.6619.
So hopefully between the videos that you watched about this and watching this, you're in good shape. All right, I'm going to let you guys go. Bye. Bye. Bye.